Thanks, Tom. Wolves in two areas of Denali National Park respond to similar prey changes in contrasting social and migratory solutions. And the response in one of the areas substantially impacts the wolves of a third area. So I want to talk a little bit here for a few minutes about these foraging variations and how they influence the longevity and sociality of the groups of wolves that use each of the areas. This map shows the three areas, eastern, central, northeastern, and the territories of 80 to 100 wolves in 15 groups as of last April. In the eastern area, the wolves pretty much maintain year-round territories with no regular prey-related migrations to other areas. In the central area, in most winters, these wolves migrate varying distances up into the northeastern area, and in the northeastern area, as a result, numbers commonly double, triple, or more, and there are frequent hostilities between migrants and the northeastern residents. Well, these foraging differences can be explained by differences in the distribution of sheep and caribou. In all three areas, moose are found in low to moderate densities, generally with the highest densities to the east, but in the eastern area also coincides with the only major area of sheep habitat in the park, with loose laying lines here. And in the summer, the wolves in that area rely primarily on caribou and moose, but after the caribou depart, rather than follow the red line here, they stay in the same area and switch heavily to sheep as well as moose in the winter. Essentially, sheep take up the slack in the absence of caribou, or most caribou at least in the winter. In the central area, there's more caribou in the summertime usually, but no sheep and generally lower moose densities, so that in most winters, when these caribou depart to a traditional wintering area up here in the northeast, the wolves in the central area have little choice but to follow. And the northeastern wolves get this abundance of prey coming to them in the winter, but along with that, lots of competition and strife from the migrants. Examples of the northeastward winter wolf migrations from the central area from the last three winters. Three groups in the central area: blue, brown, yellow, blue and brown, 8 to 12 wolves each, 2 to 3 wolves in the yellow. In 2003, the blue group was just shifting eastward into the southern Kantishna Hills, replacing another group that died out there. Not too much in the way of migrations or forays yet for that group. The brown and yellow groups, on the other hand, very definite migrations all the way northeastward to Healy and beyond. In winter 04-05, blue groups getting established in the southern Kantishna Hills, the first indications of northeastward forays in the winter, and as usual, the yellow group migrating well to the northeast. No data for the brown group because the cholera wolves died in summer 04. And then this past winter, the blue group is now pretty well established in the southern Kantishna Hills, several or more clear-cut forays well to the northeast. And as usual, the yellow group migrating well to the northeast. And on March 11th, Tom Meyer and his crew managed to catch up to the brown group up here at location 1 on March 11th, when they were obviously already on a winter migration. But a month later, and they put a collar on the alpha male, but a month later, as the brown group was cutting back toward its home here, the blue group intercepted it and killed the alpha male at location 10 here, and so now we're without telemetry contact again. Well, 40 years ago, I was able to follow the major eastern groups, Toklat and Savage, more intensively even than now by aerial snow tracking them for long, continuous intervals. At that time, Toklat had at least 2 to 3 times more caribou departing its territory at the end of each summer than now, and yet even then it did not migrate. It stayed within the same territory and had a much looser type of social organization, commonly splitting into 2 or 3 temporary subgroups hunting different areas of the territory. And then summer group size, the yellow here, started to decline with a steep decline in caribou availability in 1971 and 72. But late winter size stayed about the same before and after the decline, and after the decline there was much more cohesion, a lot less overall splitting, less than a third than before the caribou decline for the first 2 winters. And the next winter there was more splitting, but a lower percentage of the resulting subgroups contained experienced adults. The splitting was more of younger, inexperienced wolves from the core rather than splitting of the core itself. To the east, the savage group, just to the east of Toklat, had less access to the same caribou, but 2 to 3 times higher moose and sheep densities. And after recovering from some shooting losses and prior to 1970, it maintained about the same late winter size before and after the caribou decline. And it also foraged about the same before and after, and much more efficiently than Toklat East Fork. Approximately 1 moose, caribou, or sheep killed or scavenged every about 20 days and 20 miles in 2 to 3 days, or in 2 days, as opposed to 1 every 40 to 50 miles and 2 to 3 days for Toklat. The winter splitting in savage, the blue line here again, was correlated with early winter group size. It reduced large early winter group sizes while still maintaining the core social structure of the group by more often separating just the younger, inexperienced wolves of the group. It's reflected in these lower percentages here of experienced wolves in the resulting winter subgroups. Well, a major prediction from this work is that because of the greater strife in the wintertime between groups in these 2 areas up here in the northeastern area, and they're generally inferior prey bases, that there ought to be more turnover in those groups as opposed to the eastern area. And that's pretty much what the data show. 11 to 14 groups over the last 20 years in each of these 2 areas, as opposed to only 8 or 9 groups over the last 40 years in the eastern area, and some pretty impressive persistence in the eastern area. This green group here is Toklat East Fork. It's been around now for more than 41 years. Human impacts involved in group terminations in all 3 areas, but distributed the wrong way and not enough of them to explain those turnover differences. Another major prediction is that with the relative longevity of the eastern group should facilitate high levels of sociality, sophisticated cooperation. 2 of the more extreme forms of cooperation are altruistic helping and successful inbreeding. Helping means assisting breeders. Altruistic helping differs from ordinary helping in that it does not arise as an artifact of some potential direct fitness gain for the helper. Altruistic helping was commonplace in the eastern groups, and even breeders assisting other breeders. In this particular picture, 1971, the old savage group is being led by the second-ranking male, the beta male. He basically took the initiative in virtually all routine activities of the group, while the alpha male typically was quite passive, and in this case he's following right at the end of the line here. This relationship continued for at least 5 or 6 years throughout the beta male's prime reproductive years, and yet he deferred all breeding. In this picture, for example, the beta male is clearly interested in the female and estrus here, but all the alpha male has to do is cast a menacing stare at him and he stays his distance. Now this, as I say, this was a capable wolf. He could have dispersed and succeeded in starting his own group, but he instead remained within the group throughout his prime reproductive years and deferred all breeding. That's altruism in one of its purest forms. As far as successful inbreeding is concerned, the alpha male's mate in this case is almost certainly was also one of his daughters, one of 2 daughters that he mated with in 4 successive years, 1970 to 73, producing a total of 27 pups. Not only that, but 2 of the 1970 pups then, as siblings in 1972, produced their own litter of 4, which was raised within the group together with the primary litter of 5. Similarly, in 2005, all of the Toklat adults were trapped and shot, and that left just these 6 1- and 2-year-old siblings, who 2 months later produced 8 pups with at least 2 lactating females, and then This year they produced 6 more pups, again with at least 2 lactating females. Also lots of sophisticated cooperation in the eastern groups in their hunting behavior. For example, when wolves encounter moose, in most cases they don't just run up and jump on the moose. That would be suicidal usually. Instead, they typically will test it first, test its vulnerability. And the old savage group had a technique it developed for doing this, where the sequence here illustrates it. When they first rush the moose, I suppose, to try to rile it up, get a better reading on its condition. And then they cooperatively evaluate it by circling it for several minutes, as you see here, sometimes running around it, sometimes cat-like, slowly around it. And typically within 4 or 5 minutes or so, they make a determination. And in about 95% of the encounters with moose, this is how it ends up. They've given up, they don't want to mess with that moose, don't even touch it, and they simply walk away. That's how about 95% of them end up. Well, the primary management implication of this work is that protection is urgently needed in this eastern area. From Savage River eastward right now, trappers can line up legally in the wintertime and pick off wolves from near and far areas. And just as recently as 4.5 months ago, and over the previous 2 winters, 2 northeastern groups and both adjacent eastern groups have suffered, including Toklat, have suffered major trapping and hunting losses in that area east of Savage River. And then finally, I guess one size doesn't fit all. Managers should not slight the importance of wolf social groups just because the groups of certain areas are naturally short-lived. In other areas, they're quite persistent. Toklat East Fork, for example, has been around for at least 41 years. This is the 1972 picture. Both kinds of groups are important in the natural, biological, multi-scale scheme of things at Denali. And I see my time's up. That's it. Thanks.